A learner is different than a student or a recipient of a degree, right? A learner is an active posture. It's something you do in the world. There's great power in that. So we want that for kids. We want that for adults. We want that for ourselves.
Welcome to Quality Matters, where we speak with experts across industries to see how their perspectives can inform our pursuit of high-quality education for all students. I'm Shaka, and this is Caitlyn, and we're happy to be your guides for this limited series.
Like you, Shaka and I are passionate about all students having access to a great education, and quality is a driving force behind our work. But what does quality really mean? In an era where parents can customize their child's education, this question is more important than ever.
During each session, we'll hear from leaders in education, technology, business, sports, and the arts. We hope to apply their insights to our pursuit of a great education in the K-12 space.
Join us on this journey to secure a great education for all children. This is Quality Matters. All right, well, welcome back to another episode of Quality Matters. Today, we're so fortunate. We have Kelly Smith, the founder and CEO of Prenda. And I'm going to let you get into what Prenda is and share with us more about that. But first, I just want to say, I think what's so unique about you is how authentic your story is. You know, you started this idea and merging into the world of education by doing some coding work at libraries. And then you actually started a microschool in your home. So you now have 200, I think is what you said, but you're the perfect definition of putting your money where your mouth is and believing in your concept and really creating this authentic journey. So we're very grateful that you've joined us today, and we're excited to get into it and learn a little bit more about all that you have experienced and all the places you're going. I think to start us off, I would love to hear sort of what were those motivations? What was the impetus? What was the final, I've had enough of this and this is where we're going. Tell us a little bit about how Prenda started, how the idea was born, and what it looked like.
Yeah, so it would be great to paint some sort of picture of this master plan from the beginning. I think the reason it's so authentic is because it actually was me as a dad trying to solve a problem for my family and then discovering something. I didn't have plans to help thousands of people launch microschools back then. It was basically this moment with my daughter. We were getting, she was in first grade, and we were getting rave reviews. The teachers loved her. The parent-teacher conference was just, she's great. We love her. The grades were good. And we saw her each day. I mean, she's so young, 6 years old. She's coming home from school a little less enthusiastic, a little less excited. And it was gradual. It wasn't like some terrible thing that had happened to her, but we saw fire going out. And I think the big kicker, my wife went to volunteer in the classroom, and she witnessed this girl that's supposedly the perfect student. And it didn't even resemble the daughter that we knew. I mean, we were watching her do tumbling and take on sports, and like outside of the classroom, she's this like feisty, bold, like risk taker. And in school, she was so into complying with the system and the instructions. She did it well. Obviously, they loved her, but it wasn't actually her. She seemed timid and afraid. So, noticing that difference was kind of what got us talking. Meanwhile, I had been doing this educational experiment. I didn't even think of it in those terms, but I was volunteering, teaching kids to code, and I saw kids that loved learning, right? And so when you've seen fire in the eyes of a young person, it's pretty exciting. And I started to ask kind of the dangerous question, which was, what would school look like if we did it in a totally different way? My friends were interested in me, in these thoughts and ideas. So 6 of them pulled their kids out of school. I pulled one of my kids out of school, and we ran this microschool in my house in 2018. So that was the stumbling on. And then by the end of that semester, I had seen it in each of those 7 kids, just what that looks like, the confidence and swagger and energy of a learner who wants to learn, who feels like they know how to do it. And I can tell story after story, but I won't bore your listeners. It was real for me at that moment. And I felt firmly that this needs to be available to lots more people.
I love that.
That's a tremendous story. Really resonates with me, Kelly, as a father myself. And yeah, we see our kids at home, and then we wonder like what's happening between 7:30 and 3:30, right? And are they the same kids, and are they thriving, and are they both owning that educational experience to the extent that they can, or are they just kind of a cog in the wheel? And I'm glad that you and your wife were able to have that picture, right, and have that glimpse into the classroom so that you could come up with something better. And now you've done it for what, yeah, 200 plus schools. So about how many students are being served by Prenda, say for the in the upcoming school year?
We don't know our average number yet because there's still lots of scrambling. Parents are putting kids in and taking them
Yeah.
out. Last year it was about 7.5 kids per microschool, so you could kind of do the math on 200 microschools is somewhere around 1,500 kids. But yeah, that we'll see where that lands. We have some people that are very ambitious with their microschool, and it's multiple classrooms, and it's always small ratios. You got 10 kids ish with an adult who cares, but you see some that really push hard in a particular geography, and others that are very happy with the 5 of us in my kitchen, and that's great. So we don't push for a right answer on this. The nice thing about microschools is there doesn't need to be one size fits all. Each microschool can be different, and but yeah, it's in the thousands. We've actually added it up because of all these years we've been doing it, and COVID coming in the middle of that and really blowing it up. Even though we weren't quite ready to deliver a stellar experience during that portion of time, but we've added up. We've helped over 1,000 microschools get started, over time, and some of them have gone on to do microschools without us. Some of them did it for a while and then went back to public school, but we're proud of that. We feel like we've made an impact in the microschool movement, which is just so exciting to me, and I'm just grateful to be part of it.
I love hearing this story. I loved it back when I had the great fortune of coming to Arizona and exploring the real life Prenda in action. And it's so unique because even in what you've just shared a little bit, that you can get a sense that like you are taking personalization, individuality so truly, and you're applying it not just to the students, but to the people who are starting their own micro schools, to the educators, to the way that they look and the way that they feel. Like there's such uniqueness. And at the same time, there's of course this expectation for students to get a high quality learning environment. So what does it look like for you guys to gauge the success of these micro schools, to create some type of uniformity in sort of the caliber that you're delivering? Basically, how are you creating any type of consistency when you're also prioritizing, rightfully so, individuality?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's been an interesting discussion over the years. We knew from that first micro school, and some amazing people stepped up and helped build this thing. So I've been fortunate to have an amazing team throughout this whole time. But we knew from the beginning that there was something really big and something almost spiritual in what we were doing. I mean, we talk about, grassroots or organic or just unlocking something that exists already. And I believe we're doing that in kids, right? The difference between a kid sitting at a desk where school's just happening to them and a kid that takes ownership of learning, sets goals, goes out and finds who they are, and then brings the very best version of themselves to bear on, contributing to the world. I mean, you think about the difference. That's orders of magnitude. And then you multiply that out across all of humanity, right? The whole of civilization. I think you do the same thing for adults, right? You can have a teacher in a classroom whose truly heart is good and they're trying so hard, but they're given a lot of mandates and limits, and they're maybe punished for doing something outside the box or something that truly serves their students. And for that person now to be able to go and create their own microschool, it's orders of magnitude. It's this unlocking of great energy. And we wanted a name for that. We did this whole exercise with our company where we said, what is our mission? And I said, I don't want semicolons in our mission statement. Like, this has to be short and concise. We said it is empower learners. We mean something very specific with that. A learner is different than a student or a recipient of a degree, right? A learner is an active posture. It's something you do in the world. And empower meaning there's great power, just like I was talking about in that. So we want that for kids. We want that for adults. We want that for ourselves. So the mission of Prenda is to empower learners. Okay, so we knew that in 2018, 2019, and we've talked about it the whole time. But what we couldn't do back then was know, like, are we achieving this goal? And this is where it gets exciting, because over the years, we've been able to say, okay, empowered learners do these things. They look this way. Part of that is they set goals and they achieve their goals. So we give every kid an opportunity from the beginning of the year. They take a benchmark. They sit down with their guide, parent, and student. It's a GPS meeting, guide, parent, student. And they say, where are we at? Where do we want to get by the end of the year? The student takes a huge initiative in that meeting, the ownership of it. This is where I'd like to go. Interestingly, the adults are often kind of pulling them back or trying to help manage things. So our average goal set out of that meeting is about 1.8 grade levels, almost 2 grade levels of progress that kids want to make in a year. Sometimes that's because they're behind and they want to catch up. But that's kids telling us this is what we want to do. The actual results, now we track that, of course. We set the goal. We break it into bite-sized pieces. We help integrate with learning tools that are mastery-based, and we get to see kids make progress toward that goal. The average is 1.3. So we're missing the 1.8. We're hitting 1.3. The very best you could ever get in a traditional classroom is 1.0. And reality is you've got kids that are disengaged and bored and whatever. So the reality is 0.5 or something. So, you kind of look at that, and I feel proud of that. But that's just one piece of it, right? The actual mastery of educational content. The other piece of it is a portfolio. We want kids to take ownership. So we've built into our report card, we call it the Empowered Learner Report Card, not only how are you doing on your goals, but what's your portfolio? What is the work that you'd like to show off to your parents, to your friends? And that's anything from, a 3-week writing project where I researched and wrote. It could be a business that I started. It could be a science project that I led in my class. So all of this work that I'm doing in inquiry and these other modes, we're just trying to document that, celebrate it. And it's amazing to see the pride that these kids take in doing their work. And we measure, do kids use that portfolio? Do they have projects in there at all? Do they star the ones that they're proud of and put those into their report card? So there's these metrics, these behavioral metrics that we get to track. And then interestingly, the third piece of our report card, and I know this is a long answer, this is the final one, is actually how they see themselves. So we survey kids once a week. We ask questions like, how do you feel about learning this week? How's your motivation? Do you feel like in control of your own education? Is it too hard or too easy? And we're looking for, certain answers that would reflect the attitudes and perspectives of an empowered learner. So we put all this together. We literally show it on the report card. We track it. We give it to the guide. We're watching it system level. And we can now say, it's imperfect, always imperfect, but we can say these kids are becoming empowered learners or they are not, or this is the degree to which they are becoming empowered learners. And it's incredible feedback now to get back to what we were trying to do from the very beginning, which is help kids become this ideal of an empowered learner.
Yeah, that's super interesting, Kelly. And I think is probably news to a lot of folks listening that that at least the Prenda sort of microschool model is really taking some of these academic benchmarks into account. Microschooling in general is a pretty new concept still. A lot of people, I get questions about this all the time, and like, what does that mean? Do the kids take tests? Are they just at home doing like coloring worksheets and playing Roblox and stuff? And I'm like, I don't know, maybe. But it sounds like you guys are really thinking about some of these academic metrics, which is not dissimilar from conventional public schools. But so here's a question a little bit off script, but why don't you think those 3 things that you named, why don't they happen in most public school districts? Right? Why? Because, like, no offense, but as you're explaining them, and you did a great job of explaining them, but you explain them and, I understood what you were talking about, meaning this isn't rocket surgery. Why aren't we doing this in district schools?
It's a great question. I'm not in charge of district schools. So I have worked with a lot of people who are trying to make these types of changes, move things forward. I will say they run into just structural limitations, right? It's hard to do. There's also cultural barriers, like people are used to it being a certain way. And, doing, for example, project-based learning is, I think, widely recognized as good. People have tried to then add the standards to it and kind of do it in a compulsory way. And of course, then it turns into just an assignment that's called PBL instead of like an actual, what you want is student agency. That's hard for, it's hard for people to pull off with certain constraints. And so, yeah, I don't know. In terms of asking kids how they're doing, I honestly can't tell you. Like, I wish everyone would ask kids how they're doing. Maybe it's because we don't want the answers, or it's too hard to do. We find incredible value, and we do compare, hold these benchmarks up and just look at things like engagement. Like, kids in Prenda microschools are way higher than your average kid in school. They're engaged and they're happy. And, to your point about academics, it's like, we don't have to do these things. No one's making us. These are all private. They're funded through ESAs. The reason we do them is because we have customers called parents that make decisions. And guess what? Like, parents want their kids to learn how to read and do math. Like, they love the idea of their kids advancing. The kids themselves love the idea of advancing. It's not that people hate learning and they're trying not to do it. It's that the way it's done to you, and this feeling of like I sat through a lot of classes where I already understood the material. So I was bored and wasting time. There were other of my friends that were really struggling. Like, they were missing some foundational gaps in a classroom. So like, one size fits all, lecture to the group. I mean, I know people get flexible with this and they're trying to tweak it. But the reality is the whole system's built around instructional minutes, instructional hours, standards covered, grade level material. Anytime you see those buzzwords, what that's saying is you sit those kids down and you do school to them. And this is the way you do it. And that really is antithetical to learning. I'm preaching here. There's this, the fire to be kindled versus a vessel to be filled. But the whole system's built for pouring water into buckets. And if you're trying to start a fire, that's the worst thing you can do, is pour water on top of it, right? So we want fire kindled, and you have to be careful and delicate to do that.
So good. Caitlyn, I know you want to jump in here, but I do want to follow up real quick just to say something, Kelly, that you mentioned that I think, frankly, a lot of our friends who are in the education reform space, in the school choice, education freedom space, bristle at academic assessments. But I think something that you said, Kelly, and I don't want to put this on you from, say, a regulatory standpoint or what should be in public policy, but I sometimes think that sometimes in the reform community, we've been so frustrated with the rigidity of public schools that then the pendulum swings too far over and we go, oh, well, hands off. We're not going to do anything. But Kelly, something you said, I mean, I think turns out parents want to know that their kids can read. Turns out that it's actually super frustrating if your kids can't do basic math. And of course, every child has sort of said at some point, when am I ever going to use this in real life? And that is true for many things, like, let's say, trigonometry. But there are certain people who use trigonometry, right? Parents do care, I think, about academic results. So, Caitlyn, you jump in.
No, honestly, that's kind of a perfect segue, because I was actually going to just talk about the student side, but I think it's the parent side too. But at Prenda, and largely because of, the direction and your involvement, you guys have talked about the empower learners. I love that. I think that is so, it's succinct, it's digestible, and it's really clear. So I think that's great. You don't need me to tell you that it's great, but that's a really neat, like, punchy boom. When I hear you talk about what it looks like in practice, I also get this major sense of self-awareness that you're fostering in the students, and dually in that self-awareness, there's like a confidence component, there's a humility, there's a curiosity, there's all these great adjectives that we could use to describe. And so I would love to hear sort of what your take is on this self-aware, what it looks like to be a self-aware student. But to sort of touch on Shaka's point and probably make my question more complicated, what does it look like to have self-aware parents who are also in the mix, and self-aware guides who are, you've got a lot of people who are advocating for what they think is right for themselves and what they think is best. And then, you know, it all comes together and somehow makes magic and lights these fires.
Yeah. And I will say this is not easy, and it's not something I even feel like we've finished, right? I think we are leading on this. We are out there in kind of uncharted territory doing something new, which invites a student to be in the driver's seat of their education. Like that was not my experience in school. That's not most people's experience. So sit in the driver's seat, the guide's sitting right next to you in the passenger seat with advice and pointers and, you know, some real-time correction, some debrief afterwards. You think of this analogy of like teaching someone to drive or letting them ride a bike. It also, you know, means there's going to be some mistakes, you know, and everyone's has to be comfortable with that. So we spend a lot of our time with our guides. We have the benefit of each of these guides chose to do this. They've taken initiative. They've stepped up. So agency, like autonomy from the beginning, really does open this up. They say, if I want to run a kind of drill and kill, top down, sage on the stage kind of model, like people do that as a microschool. Prenda's probably not for me. It's not like Prenda's tools. You could theoretically do it. Like we're not policing anything, but like Prenda's tools are not going to help you do that. We've built everything around helping get these kids in the microschool or in the driver's seat in their learning. So the guides are incredible. If you visit these guides, there's depth of wisdom. They're pulling from sometimes decades of, you know, actual real life interactions with humans, whether it's been in a classroom or other things. And I will just say on the student side, you know, we have one of our core values is called Start with Heart. And what we say with Start with Heart is we can see a human on the other end. I want that to be with coworkers, with people that I'm talking to on podcasts, but I really want that to apply to the kids we're working with, to see the humanity in them and treat it as such. I know it sounds like pie in the sky. I would just argue that that's not the experience. Like traditional education is not like what I'd call a humanizing experience. And so when you start there, you say, okay, you're a human being with value and potential. And my job here is to help you see that. That doesn't mean I'm fluffy and it's just video games and pizza parties. Like, because I love you, because I care about you, I'm actually going to tell you the truth. We're going to like actually look at where you're at, what's real. I'm going to push you. I'm going to expect maybe more of you than you expect of yourself, right? That can be, so it's, you know, I just want to make clear, like the kids in my microschool had moments where they were crying because they were pushing hard for a goal. And there were days that were frustrating. And my job then is like, hey, you're all right. You know, like pick it back up. You're going to be okay. But you know, that piece for the student. And then I would say the parents, and this is, to be totally honest, this is where we're the farthest behind. Like we've done a better job with guides and students. The parents, we're trying to bring them into the car as well, right? Like get in this car and see what's going on. There's a lot of parents that are still in a very passive mindset about education, and they've been conditioned that way. I don't blame them. It's like you just sort of pick the school, send them off, you get a report card back. And, yeah. And so we're fighting that. We're saying, look, this is how you can be involved. These are the types of things that report card that we've created, we think actually will lead to discussions instead of just leading to punishments and rewards. This is like, you can talk about this, you can be a partner in it, you can support your child. So that's, I think, our next horizon, our next frontier as we keep pushing this forward is getting parents that really are willing to believe that students can be in the driver's seat and they want to be in the car with them.
Yes.
Kelly, that's really helpful. And, you know, we've heard you talk a lot about some of the values that undergird the work at Prenda, both from when you originally started and kind of what the impetus was there, to how you sort of think about. I mean, I love your analogy of like the worst way to sort of fan this flame is to pour water on it. Fantastic.
That's Plutarch. Right? I don't get to claim it.
Well, that's all right. Somebody needs to be the translator sometimes.
Okay.
So here's a question. I mean, Caitlyn and I started this podcast because we think so much about quality, and in this now emerging landscape where there are so many different models than used to exist for the parents that you're serving, right? It used to be conventional schools and maybe a private school, and that was it. Now you got charter schools. Certainly in a place like Arizona, you've got just the models are flourishing, which is really tremendous and a big value add. But we started this podcast because we said, well, but how do we know that that quality is sort of on the upward trajectory? Because after all, we want kids to have a high quality experience. So let me ask this question in kind of a negative way. What might be the things that cause you or have caused you to close a Prenda school, right? To sort of come in and say, hey, this is not working. You're not meeting the sort of quality standards that we think are important. What might those be?
So this is a great question. It's a huge philosophical discussion that Prenda's grappled with, just as the rest of the school choice world has had to grapple with this, right? When when we allow people to start microschools using our platform, and it's their microschool, we're not in charge. We have had times in our past where we were working through charter schools or district school partnerships, and there were rules that we had to kind of enforce and apply. So we've kind of been there where we were more like a higher bar.
Fidelity to the model?
Right. We had to, sometimes it was fidelity to our model. It was mostly other people's rules and values imposed upon them. So, some of the things that the government requires for a kid with special needs, I believe are harmful to that kid and pushes them in the wrong direction. But people say quality, and that's kind of what they think of as all these rules. So I guess my caution is to be really careful, like not going there. The question we have to ask ourselves is, do we trust the market? So if I have a guide that says, I want to do a microschool like this, and I look at it and I say, I would not put my kid in that microschool. Like, I just don't think that's good. But I see 10 parents do, right? They say, yes, I want that. And we can make sure that guide's telling the truth and that they've passed a background check. So they're safe with kids. They're not like, they don't have this record of like hurting kids, and parents are choosing them. Like, am I okay with that looking different than the way that I would maybe want it for my kids? And that's a really tricky question, because when push comes to shove, like, I think all of us are a little bit afraid of allowing people that agency and autonomy. So yeah, I mean, for me, we've decided to really trust families, to trust parents, to trust these markets to work, and to say, hey, quality equals happy parents, happy kids, happy guide, like a voluntary exchange of, working together. And if anyone's unhappy, they can go away. We see this a lot. So much more common than Prenda, like shutting down a microschool. We see microschools that don't ever get off the ground because the parents don't feel good about the guide. They don't feel confident in the educational philosophy or whatever. They say, look, you seem nice. I don't want my kid to go there. And eventually that guide doesn't have any kids, so there's no microschool. And we see that actually quite a bit.
That's really helpful. Yeah.
It reminds me of two conversations we've had with people on this podcast. So one, we had a conversation with Carrie McDonald, and she gave the analogy, and I'm going to use her analogy to sort of merge it with what you were just saying. But she spoke about a grocery store and having different options in the grocery store. You can buy cereal that's, red dye 40 and sugars. You have the choice.
We'll call that Fruity Pebbles.
Yes, exactly. You can buy your organic produce and only eat the vegetables. Like, at what point, nobody would say, hey, we're going to actually tell you the only things you can and can't buy in a grocery store, like take away every autonomy. But it doesn't mean that you're comfortable with every choice someone is choosing to make, Right. And so she, elaborated on that in a whole different direction, which I thought was really interesting. So if people are curious, they should check out that episode as well. Yeah. But the last thing that you just mentioned, whether or not parents continue to engage, continue to send their children, is a huge determinator of the success of the microschool. Do parents feel like it works? Do children, are they getting what they need? And we just had a conversation actually with a man named Clint Smith, who spoke about his number one metric for success when he was launching his, tech product was, do the clients return? Are they coming back because they like what they're receiving?
That's real feedback.
Right. He's not even in the education world, but he spoke exactly to the point you just made of the feedback loop and what you're getting in real time. And if people are engaging, that's about as direct a feedback as you could ask for as far as, is this successful or not?
Yeah, we can have as many meetings as we want, talking about what we think everyone should care about. But ultimately, end of the day. And what's interesting about grocery stores, I think it's a beautiful analogy. In fact, Scott Alexander has talked about this on the blog Slate Star Codex. It's fascinating because he says you don't tell grocery stores what they can and can't sell. Like, people just will not come if they don't like what you're selling. And we allow many grocery stores to exist with different focuses, and people can choose. And if you were to sort of survey people about their happiness with the grocery store world, like, you'd have in America a very high satisfaction, like 100%, or, it'd be high. If you instead look at, like, the government runs the grocery store and there's only one, like, the percentage of people that are happy with that is low, right? I wanted bread. There was no bread. The line was too long, whatever. So, just comparing these paradigms, I think we figured something out. I mean, not we, like Adam Smith or capitalists have somehow figured out how markets are effective. And that's painful to hear if you're used to things the way they are. But I think the cool thing is, as everybody recognizes parents in this decision-making capacity, everybody steps up and says, well, what do parents want? I've seen school districts in the last 2 years ask questions of parents that they did not care about before. Right now they do care. And the parents then say, this is what's important to us. And we do want to still send our kids to this district. And here's what we're looking for. And the districts have a choice now of, do I listen to that and adapt and, participate? I think everybody's better for it.
Agreed.
Yeah. Kelly, let me ask you one final question as we're sort of coming to the end of our time. And we've just really appreciated this and getting to learn more about Prenda. And I know that our audience is really going to dig learning more about just microschool and the movement in general, but your school specifically. We'll make sure we drop some links in into the show notes. But I wonder if you might dream big. And frankly, I would say you've already kind of done some of this, to go from half a dozen kids in your kitchen to now 200, active schools, but maybe 1,000 over time, and thousands of kids being served is pretty big. If you were to dream even further out, if every community in America had access to something like Prenda, what do you think would change for families? What might you tell, say, a governor or state lawmakers who are thinking, because that's often what is sort of a like the restrictor plate on how fast this movement can go, right? Is the regulatory and the legal environment of a state. So what do you tell somebody, policymakers, like, hey, if we could do this in your state, here's what you might experience? What do you tell them?
Yeah. Well, okay, so it goes from micro to macro. And I will just say, I could talk about this for a long time. I wrote a book called A Fire to Be Kindled that basically, like, is my manifesto about this. I get so excited, Shaka, about a world where this is happening, but at the tiniest scale. So my degree was nuclear physics. You got hydrogen atom, you try to smash them together. And
wait, so you really were doing rocket surgery?
It was nuclear. Nuclear physics is different. But literally, that idea of, like, these two pieces of matter, like, they have energy by themselves, but put together, there's an explosion that's unlocked. There's so much energy that can come out. And that's literally what powers our sun, right? Like the sun at the center of our solar system. So this is what's in humans, like this power, this energy to create, to live meaningfully, to achieve things. It could happen in so many different domains depending on the people. So, what is somebody going to do with AI to make people's lives better? What is someone going to do with a paintbrush or with a musical instrument? What are they going to do with human relationships and organizing? Humans have the capacity to solve problems. We so underestimate this. And it is, that they talk in nuclear physics about, 1 million times more energy coming out of that reaction than went into it. It's big numbers. I think we're just drastically underestimating what's possible if you just let humans be that. And so we see that happening in microschools. I get stopped on the street by moms whose kids were so frustrated and stuck, and the mom knew it, right? There's only one choice. I just send my kid to school, and every day she would sit in the car and say, don't make me go in there. I don't want, it could be a number of reasons. I don't want to do it. And she finds a micro school. They're now part of this small group where that kid gets to be fully autonomously driving their education, starts to become this, even in the earliest, months in, you see the same mom look at her kid and say, that's it. Like that right there is your potential and your gift. And so I want that unlocked. And that's the micro. That's one kid. Imagine that times, 200 micro schools right now is nothing. Like I think we should have 1,000,000 micro schools. Like there should be so many in the US. I want everybody to be like, oh, I want to help create the solution to this problem. Like let's make my own educational environment. I see it from inside and outside of the system. There's just humans out there that can solve these problems. I want to see those people step up and solve them. And for the governments to just allow that to happen is really the key. So we can talk about specifics, but that's the vision, is this massive release of human energy that really will lead to a better world for everyone. I mean, I really believe it. So end rant.
No, I'm ready to give you the microphone and the platform and turn it over. Let it loose. Yeah. I think that's so awesome. I think what you're doing is so impressive. And I know that the people listening are going to find so much inspiration from your reason, your why, and then also what you're actually building. So Kelly, we're really grateful for you joining us today. We're excited for other people to hear the conversation and sort of share their reactions to what we've discussed. And maybe we'll have a part 2 and really turn it over, give you the soapbox.
It's been so fun, Caitlyn. Thanks for having me.
All right, Caitlyn, we just had a great conversation with Kelly Smith. If you are watching this episode, definitely go back and listen to that full interview with Kelly Smith. He's the founder of Prenda Microschools. They're doing some really cool things. But Caitlyn, I'm curious to get your thoughts on some of what we heard. I thought we might jump in with a phrase that I heard Kelly say. He said, start with heart. And it's something that kind of undergirds how they think about the student experience. And so not sort of starting so much with purely academic metrics or purely some kind of regulatory scheme. But he said, we just think it's really important to start with heart. And that was for both the parents, guides, and students. How did all that strike you?
Yeah, I loved that. Recognizing the humanity behind the other people. I think that's so powerful. And I think it's so fascinating how they're living it out, how it's their reality. They're creating environments where kids feel safe, where kids feel understood, where kids have the freedom and the opportunity to explore interests, cultivate new passions. Like they're really living that motto, and they're really emphasizing the humanity behind each element of their model. The kids are being recognized, the guides, the recognition of and the allowability that they have to create these environments that reflect what they believe is a strong learning environment or an opportune learning environment. Trying to incorporate the parents and recognize the humanity behind them. It's clear, even if it wasn't specifically articulated, that they recognize the privilege of educating someone else's child. Like there's just so much, there's so many different ways to look at where they are leading with heart and where they're acknowledging the humanity and the individuality behind each of the components and behind each of the people.
Yeah, some of that individuality too, I think comes out at the beginning of the school year, where they sit down and everyone lists their goals for the year. They're individual to the student or unique to the student. That alone, I think, could be really impactful for all students in all school types, right? So I think about our school year recently started in Tennessee. And of course, it's the end of the summer. kids are like, you sort of want to go back, you want to see your friends, but you don't really want to go back. And if you're going for a long school day or whatever, it's exhausting and to have the routine again. Um, but rather than going back and thinking, oh, why am I here? I'm only here because whatever, it's August 15th or it's after Labor Day and this is what I have to do. Versus, here are my goals. By the end of this year, I'm going to be a fourth grader who can do these things. I'm going to be a fourth grader who can read on a sixth grade level or whatever. And really owning that, I think, could be really powerful.
No, I totally agree. You know what it made me think of? Maybe our first or one of our first interviews with Ashley Berner. And she talked about the underperform or
sort of under challenging.
Yes, thank you. When she made that statement that she sees across the country, so many kids are being under considered. They are not expected to reach their highest potential, and people are setting low bars for them. And to hear Kelly talk about how they actually have the kids set their own bars, and they're sitting right there, with their guide and with their parent, and they're given that autonomy to say, where do you want to reach? What do you want to reach for? Where do you want to achieve? And then
by the way, he said that the kids, or that the number is usually 1.8 school years.
Yeah, exactly. So they're identifying for themselves that they want to achieve higher. So this notion of underperformance or, not having people believe that you can do more than you can totally goes by the wayside. And so I think, the way I viewed it is that Ashley Berner described a problem that she's noticing in schools across the country. And Kelly Smith just offered the solution for that. Stop having the teachers be the ones that set the expectations.
Well, and especially,
I get that it's a nuanced discussion, but
no, I think these things are super related, and especially in a system where inevitably what ends up happening in many schools is that you set a goal that is just the lowest possible sort of benchmark that's satisfactory, right? So it's not that that we say, well, what's the goal? What's the aggregate goal for the classroom? Well, we want every kid to master this content. That is never a classroom goal. The classroom goal is something more like, well, last year, 35% of our kids were proficient. So wouldn't it be great if this year 36% were proficient? It's like, that is so lame. Let's just call a spade a spade. That is super lame. We can do better. But I don't mean to just put that on a teacher. I think part of that is, okay, how do we get everybody, all the stakeholders involved? Well, let's ask them what their goals are and then orient towards that.
I think that is exactly sort of what I was also noticing. The other part that I thought was really interesting in our discussion, where quality matters, we talk about quality, we talk about why it matters, we talk about what it looks like, we talk about how to measure it. And every now and then we get like the most real discussion, or what I feel is the most real discussion around quality. And it always is the least, there's always the least amount of like defined boxes when we discuss what it actually looks like. It's the most gray idea of quality, but it's like the most real. You can feel it. And so what I'm trying to say is that when he's talking about parents returning, but he's simultaneously talking about, people are creating microschools that they believe are right for them, and they're not right for everybody. You can't measure, there aren't a set of 10 boxes that need to be checked for every single microschool. And this is what it has to look like. And this is what the schedule looks like. And this is what's taught. And this is what's read. And yet you can get a real sense of whether or not it's high quality and whether or not it's doing exactly what it needs to do and serving its right purpose, because you're giving people the freedom to choose if it's right for them. And you're giving people the freedom to determine if it's high quality in their eyes. So it's like the looser you let you let the reins go, the the better definition of quality you end up sensing, because even if it can't be explicitly articulated
Mhm.
on a list.
Mhm, mhm.
I'm not sure
Yeah,
how much that
because the flip side of that is if you were to look at lots of state codes, say,
Mhm,
where everything is defined, right?
mhm,
But elementary schools are defined. What does it mean to be an elementary school? It means these things. What does it mean to be a
mhm.
high school? It means these things. Um, if you look at those definitions are going to be really rigid, and frankly, they're going to have I would say, very little bearing on the efficacy that we hope for in the educational process. So that it's going to
Mhm.
say things like, what's an elementary school? Well, an elementary school is a building of at least 35,000 square feet that meets for 180 days and covers grades, you know, K through 4 and blah blah blah. And you sort of go like, all right, that's a bunch of words, but that didn't really tell us anything about how the kids are doing.
Yeah,
Or
yes.
and it's certainly not aspirational. Like, it frankly feels like it has more to do with like a construction project than it does human flourishing. And
Yes.
Kelly, I think, is really interested in this human flourishing issue, and that is necessarily more difficult to articulate and to quantify. But I do trust parents, and I think we've got to trust parents to sort of say, "Hey, this is not working. So do we have some options?" Right? And so that to me is pretty key. And this is where, if I feel like there can be a breakdown with our I know you love the grocery store analogy, and I'm like, you know, I'm halfway there. Um, I think it works for a lot of things. But the difference to me is, like, Arizona feels like a grocery store environment because there's
Yeah,
so many different options. Florida feels like a grocery store environment, so many different options. Um, Missouri is not there yet, right?
right,
If you're in the middle of Missouri, if you're in Jeff City, you don't really have that many options. If you're
right.
between Jeff City and St. Louis, you definitely don't have that many options. And so that's where it can break down a little bit, is because, well, sometimes people they have to go back to that lower quality thing because there's
For
just
sure.
not many options. So, that's not a fault with the analogy. It's a fault of the status quo system. But yeah, I love this idea of how do we make sure that kids are thriving, that they're learning, let's engage them and the parents. It's all really super stuff.
Yeah, no, I'm totally on that same page. Last part the last part of the conversation that we just had, I thought was also incredibly um inspiring, is probably the best word. I just Humans solve problems, and we're seeing that he's solving a problem.
Yep.
We're hoping to solve a problem, you and I, in these conversations. um what does it look like when we give kids the opportunity to start solving problems, or when we give individuals and guides and parents the opportunity to try and solve their kids problems? That analogy, I don't know the terminology, but when the two come together and their output is greater than the energy it
Yeah.
took for them to come together, that's a real life. That is a reality in life. And so what does that look like when kids are put in the right environment and given the right environment to thrive? And where are they able to take it? And I just can't imagine what it looks like for someone to say, nope, I don't want my kids to have that opportunity. That sounds great, but I don't want that in my state. I just don't.
Right.
I still,
Well, yeah, I wonder. I don't know if it's fear based, right? Sometimes maybe it's like fear of the unknown.
sure.
Sometimes I do think like there's a lot of entrenched kind of um, interests that support the status quo, right? I mean, there's the fact that school boards, which are democratically elected bodies, the
Hmm.
fact that school boards have associations to represent them, like, you are representatives. Why did the representatives need a representative? It'd be like if Congress had somebody representing them. Like, what are you talking about? It's you. But school boards have lobbyists representing them in front of state governments, right? So I do think sometimes it's just these entrenched interests that are comfortable with this known quantity. But I think what Kelly's showing and what a lot of other micro school leaders and founders and parents are showing is that old way is not dynamic. And what you're saying, right? That fission, that nuclear fission, it's dynamic, it's exciting, it gives off a lot of heat. But we're seeing it in many, many states. And I think increasingly that's going to continue to grow.
I'd be so curious, and maybe this is a good place to sort of wrap us, but I would be really curious where other people are finding pockets where that's taking place. Is it in your micro schools? Is it in your family homes? Like, where are people creating spaces for humans to solve the problems best, for them to feel safe and empowered and encouraged to explore, to be curious? And once you've identified where those pockets are, where those environments live and are created, what's the criteria that makes those environments successful to do those things? Is it that you don't have restrictions? Is it that you feel encouraged? Someone believes in you? Is it that you have resources and your exposure to new ideas? What's the criteria that builds those types of environments, and where are they currently existing?
Yeah, that's a great question. Great question. And we'd love for folks to leave some ideas in the comments. Please do like and subscribe to this. And Caitlyn, I look forward to having another conversation on Quality Matters soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Shaka.